Hey, it's BAO, and this is Coffee with BAO, where I chat with awesome people about their creative process, their cultural identity, and how they're continuing to grow as a human being. You can find all of my past guests or get in touch with me at coffeewithbao.com. I'm really excited about my guest today. I'm hanging out with a fellow Vietnamese American artist. He's an illustrator, cartoonist, a humor writer. His art has been in books and board games and publications like The Nib, The Guardian, Time Out New York, BuzzFeed, Wired, and recently he's been a cartoonist for The New Yorker. So fancy. So here's my new friend from Brooklyn, Jeremy Nguyen. Ah!
Hello. Hi, Bao. How
Hey,
you doing?
I'm
I
doing
think we
great.
might have the same chair.
This knockoff management
Yes,
chair.
knockoff like Herman Miller thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks for joining me, Jeremy.
I noticed as you were swiveling around.
You're in Brooklyn, and your online presence talks a lot about Brooklyn. So I feel like you're like the mayor of Brooklyn. Is that true?
No, definitely not a political figure here. But yeah, no, I mean, I love Brooklyn. I'm not born in Brooklyn, but I was born in Oakland, I was raised in Oakland, California. So I don't really claim Brooklyn as my, a breeding ground, but it's now my home. I've been here for about 10 years, so I'm happy to call it
Cool.
home. Yeah.
You actually were not born in Oakland, though, right? You were born in Phoenix, from what I read.
Phoenix, Arizona. I barely have any memory of it. I moved
Yeah.
out of Phoenix when I was about 3 or 4 to Portland, Oregon. My dad worked at IBM in a little town called Aloha, Oregon, just outside of Portland.
Aloha.
Um, yeah, I was there for, maybe kindergarten, first grade, and then we moved to Bangkok, Thailand for like a year.
Yes.
And then my parents moved us back to the States. We were in Austin, Texas for a year, but we finally settled down in Fremont, California. And I went to school in Hayward.
Nice.
But yeah, lots of Asians in the Bay Area.
Like I was born in Vietnam. I grew up in Orange County here in Southern California. And then I moved to
Okay.
Houston as a teenager. And I feel like getting out of your element a little bit really influenced the way that I think about, you know, um, being more open-minded about everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder how you see moving around and especially like internationally affecting the way that you are now.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, whenever I speak to fellow Asian creatives or Asian people who grew
Mm.
up in the Midwest around a ton of white people, I don't know if I really relate as much to it. There were definitely, white people when I was growing up in Oregon, but
Yep.
when I moved to Thailand, there were a lot of Korean students at this international English-speaking school in
Mm.
Bangkok. And then I lived in the Bay Area where there's a ton of Asian Americans. My school was mostly dominantly Filipino American.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I feel so lucky to have grown up around, 80% Asian students at my schools because it just took away any of that feeling outside of your comfort zone and having to assimilate to a specific culture. It's kind of funny. The Filipino kids that I went to school with, they all wish they were black.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's like another wrinkle to the diaspora, that I don't know how that changes the way I was brought up, but we were very influenced by hip hop culture and
Yeah.
what was happening in Oakland at the time, and there was a huge music scene growing up. So I think it being around all Asians allowed me to build confidence and not feel as if I was having to assimilate to another culture.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. Are your parents like first generation
They're first
from
generation.
Vietnam?
They're refugees. They escaped the Vietnam War back when they were teenagers. And they
Wow.
settled in Nebraska. They were like the only two Vietnamese
Wow.
families in Omaha. And, I only learned recently that my uncle on my dad's side once dated my aunt on my mom's side. When I was growing up, I thought they were just separate relatives, but like maybe in the past couple of years, I found out how integrated my two families were, and that they all my uncles and aunts on this side knew all my uncles and aunts on that side. It was strange, but my mom talks about how she and her sisters worked at like the local Nebraska drive-in movie theater. And that's,
Wow.
I think, probably where my dad met her and they started dating. And yeah, it was kind of funny that, the typical story is that it's a couple moves to America together, bringing their kids or giving birth to their kids here. But it was kind of funny that my parents grew up a little bit American in their teenage years.
Yeah.
And,
Interesting.
they went to prom. They went to prom with white people. Yeah, and then they found each other, I guess.
That's really cool.
Hmm.
When you guys were growing up, how did you practice being Vietnamese? Like, what were some things that your family did that, specifically made you feel like, all right, I'm preserving my Vietnameseness?
Oh, I think I'm going to disappoint you there. I think I kind of rejected being Vietnamese when I was a
Oh,
kid, just because,
this is juicy stuff. I
yeah.
want to know.
I know this is going to be awful to say out loud, but my parents moved us to California because I did have a lot more family in Alameda County. My grandma lives in Fountain Valley, Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they wanted us to be like my cousins who were fully Californian. They were born and bred Californians in San Jose.
Wow.
And they went to like Vietnamese church. They did Vietnamese Girl Scouts. And my parents really wanted us, myself and my brother, to join Vietnamese Boy Scouts and go to Vietnamese church, even though
Yeah.
they never taught us the language. They tell me that when I was 4 or 5 years old, that I spoke exclusively Vietnamese, and they
Wow.
had to enroll me in a Head Start program. So a Head Start program before preschool. So it's preschool
Yeah.
for
I went there too,
children.
actually.
Oh, did you? No kidding. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. But it's because, I had the Asian speech impediment of replacing my R's with L's or L's with R's, I forget. And I would only speak Vietnamese to the teachers. So they
Wow.
kind of yeah, they kind of had to beat that out of me. And I guess I never went back. I don't really speak Vietnamese anymore.
Wow. Interesting. So your
Yeah,
middle name
so,
is Vu, right? And
right.
is that what your family calls you?
They do not call me Vu. My nickname is Mi, as in like banh mi, because I eat a lot of bread and stuff. And so it also goes well because my name is Jeremy, so they call me Jeremy.
Oh,
And my brother's name is Christopher, so they call him Christopher. So they refer to us as Pha and me.
that's great. From what I read, your father was like a scientist, he worked on microchips or something?
Yes, he was a semiconductor at IBM. He
Huh.
has some sort of patent in the microchip developing process.
Wow.
And my mom actually didn't finish college when she and my dad got married, but she
Yeah.
has been a tailor and a seamstress and many other jobs. But she eventually got her degree in medicine and became a pharmacist, pharmacology, I guess.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And, my dad had bounced around to different tech companies. There was a microchip factory or a company that he worked at in Thailand, and that's why we moved there when IBM crashed in the 90s. Yeah, and then we moved back to the States when that business went under, and he was like a traveling, I don't know what he did when we were in Texas, but he wasn't home a lot because he had to fly around for business. I remember that sucking. Then he found some work in tech here in California. Yeah.
The reason I ask is you mentioned in another interview that you've always known that you were like an artist and that's what you wanted to do. And your parents definitely, didn't work in that field at all. So I'm curious as to like how and when you kind of like solidified that idea that like art is my thing.
Yeah. So, my mom does have a creative side as someone who like sews clothing and, she'll design her own clothing too and sketch out some things. But I always drew as a kid. My brother and I would come up with ridiculous superheroes, and I was a big Lego maniac, as they said back in the day.
Lego maniac, yes.
Yeah. Those commercials would drive my mom crazy because I would sing them all the time. But yeah, no, I was always a creative, art-loving, drawing person. And, my parents were the typical go get your engineering or doctor's degrees.
Yeah.
Once I think they learned of what law is, they asked that they were like, you guys should become lawyers.
Wow.
Yeah, but my dad had always, I think he was the youngest of his family, and his father, my grandfather, was a surgeon back in Vietnam. And my grandfather had always pushed my dad to go into chemistry and maybe be a doctor. Yeah, and my dad rejected being a doctor himself. I kind of feel like I followed in my dad's footsteps of rejecting medicine completely.
It's funny to me how previous generations have a certain image of what's considered work, and then like always the next generation has a totally different concept.
Yeah. I'm part of a generation that doesn't want kids. So
yeah.
There's a lot
me and
of,
you we got a lot of similarities.
Absolutely. So, I don't know. And when I think about if I did want kids, would I be pushing them towards the arts? Would I be pushing them towards making money? Would they see my life and be like, I should be making money?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, Dad, my artist dad can't afford the PS6. So I'm going to go into law and make some money. Yeah.
Maybe, huh?
Right? Yeah. Who knows?
Which Academy of Art did you attend before you went to Savannah College of Art and Design?
Yeah. So I took high school classes at the San Francisco Academy of Art.
Nice.
They offered like high school programs that were college transferable. You can earn a credit for every summer course you take, which was awesome. And I had some fantastic teachers. I met Derek Kirk Kim, who is a graphic novelist, and now he's like a story editor, story supervisor, producer for Cartoon Network and other kids shows. And then another teacher that I'm still in contact with was another Asian American person named Walden Wong. He's a award-winning inker for Marvel and DC Comics. And yeah, it's so great to have those two Asian American role models at a very young age doing what I want to be doing. They would go to all the San Francisco comic conventions and Just having them be in my life was, fantastic. Yeah.
That's awesome. So eventually you move out to Georgia, Savannah College of Art and Design. You're actually the second guest that went to SCAD.
No kidding.
Benny Mitchell was a previous guest, and he did
cool.
He did some film and stuff there. But then you started working for this Comixology, which that leads me to think like you were like really focused on the whole comic thing.
Absolutely, yes. No, I was.
That's awesome.
No, I was very lucky to get to study comics when I was in Savannah, Georgia, and at SCAD. A lot of the upperclassmen that I had went to school with, they graduated in 2008, 2009 during the housing crisis, crash, economic destruction that happened. And I was lucky enough to not have graduated 2 years prior to when I actually did in 2011. As I was in college, I was watching their careers, or lack thereof, sadly. And it really absolutely propelled me to work my ass off to try and get any comics job that I could. And, a lot of my classmates, a few of my classmates did very well when they graduated. They got freelance work out the gate. People from other majors were working at Naughty Dog Studios and making video games, or getting jobs at DreamWorks and Disney. But as a cartoonist, as a comics artist, there weren't as many opportunities. So I was very lucky to be able to find a full-time. It started out part-time, became full-time very quickly at Comixology, who, they were scaling up. And, when I first started there were maybe 30 employees. And then in the first year I was there, they had hired 100.
Wow.
So I was able to actually bring on a couple of my classmates in as my coworkers, as well as work on a team with other cartoonists from SVA and CCS Cartooning School in Vermont, and RISD and Pratt and Parsons, all these New York art schools that I was jealous of. There's not a lot of opportunities, but this place was able to pluck some of us up and give us a life in New York.
That's so cool. You ended up freelancing for a few places. Thrillist was one of them. You started your own Stranger Than Bushwick comic.
Yep.
Illustrated some books. Board games. Was that a weird process? Like, I don't know very many people who work on board game art.
Board games was, it fell into my lap because, I never really got, my brother is a big player of board games. I'm terrible at any games, but I love, the gaming world, and, board game art is, a thriving, industry right now. And there's so many gorgeous games out there. But what got me into them was that my best friend from college graduated with an animation degree. He moved out to LA, worked in the animation industry, and hated it. He hated doing, lighting pretty actors' faces. That's pretty much his job. So he developed a game called Cat Lady that got bought by a board game company called AEG. And they hired him to be an art director for a few of their other titles coming out. And then when he pitched his follow-up game, his second game to Alderock Entertainment Group, he asked me to come on board and illustrate it. So we did a game about Santa Monica, and I flew out to see him in Santa Monica. We stayed at the Alderock Entertainment Group's headquarters for 7 days, and we ate, drank, and slept Santa Monica for 24 hours, 7 days a week. I'm drawing, he's play testing with some testers, and we got to hang out like it was college again. It was fantastic. We took some pictures down on the boardwalk and integrated a lot of the jokes that we were making with each other into the game, and it's one of my proudest pieces because it just reflects so much of our relationship into this game that millions, maybe not millions, but thousands of people play.
That's so cool. That's actually like a interesting niche venue for your art, and like I said, I don't know very many people who work in board game art, so I thought that was such a cool part of your career so far.
Yeah, I love to do like weird mediums. You know, I want my career to be as unpredictable and surprising as possible because it's such a fun thing to be an artist for all kinds of people and not just a single audience. You know, I'm very happy with where I'm at with the New Yorker, but they only reach a certain amount of people and a certain type of person. So doing board games has been super eye-opening, and I absolutely love the community that is the board game community.
Nice. I guess late 2017, somebody introduced you to the New Yorker and you started submitting stuff to them, and eventually they published some stuff, and you've been going strong, man. I see your New Yorker comics all the time, and I absolutely love them. And I'm curious, does the New Yorker's format require you to like change your style or your process in any way?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that they do. They don't require it, but I personally changed my workflow to fit better with submitting cartoons to them. Some people notice that my style looks different for the New Yorker than it does for other projects. And that is, for me, deliberate. I wanted to choose a style that is a bit more economical for me to pitch 10 cartoons a week to the New Yorker. Wow. But I'm also a big lover of classic New Yorker cartoons. My favorite eras are, the 1960s and 1970s New Yorker cartoons. I also love, the last decade of great cartoons. But the 60s and 70s have a lot of great style to them. That Mad Men era of the New Yorker and magazines was such a fun time. So I try to evoke a nostalgic style as well as a classic style, but giving it a modern flair, a modern flavor to it. When I started out, I showed a stranger my cartoons, and I had only published maybe 2 or 3 cartoons, and this person, I don't know how educated on the New Yorker cartoon history they were, but they were like, oh, you're like a New Yorker cartoonist. I think he was confused because I was like young looking, and he was like, looking at the cartoon as if, have you been doing this for like 50 years? Your cartoons look like they might have been in the magazine before I was born. So yeah, it was a very funny moment, and I was like, nah, I'm just trying to pretend as if these cartoons could be in the era.
That is hilarious. I saw recently on your social media you were offering mentorship opportunities, which I thought was super cool, to other illustrators.
Yes.
And you plan on doing like a talk as well in the near future in a couple of days from when this episode airs. Can you give us like your elevator pitch on the talk? The talk.
Yeah. So the mentorship is something that I had wanted to offer during last year's upswell for the Black Lives Matters movement. There were a lot of talks of people wanting to extend their hands out to marginalized communities. And, last year I was just not in a great place to offer that as much as I wanted to. I was in the middle of moving apartments, and I wasn't even close to being financially stable enough to take time out of my work week to offer this. So after a year of mulling it over, I sort of found myself in a spot where I could. So I sort of instinctually was like, I'm just going to jump into it and figure it out as I go. You know, I'm 31 and I've only been freelancing for about 4 years. So I don't really know if I'm an expert enough to offer a mentorship, but I wanted to do something, and I wanted to do something just to help as much as I can.
Love it. So
it was
cool.
Incredible to see the application process, because I received so many incredible statements of intent from all across the world, or literally. There are some incredible artists everywhere. You know, there was almost 100 applicants. It was so hard to find the 1 or 2 people that I could work with, because so many of them were so talented. So so I'm offering a one-time seminar to all of those applicants as well as the general public, and I've teamed up with this fantastic company called Creatively, who wanted to help out and, you know, give me the resources to do that. And
Awesome.
So I'm very excited. It's going to be a talk that's very geared towards people who are lost as artists and don't know their first step, their next step, you know, because there are a lot of lost artists out there, and there's seems to be something missing from the academic world of art schools that these artists are not getting. And part of my mission is to try and give a raw conversation and lecture about what the realities of the industry are.
Awesome.
It takes place on May 20th, and there will be more details about it on May 12th. So it is going to happen like very fast, and hopefully we can get the word out about this amazing opportunity that I hope turns out to be amazing for these cool artists.
Let me point you guys to the right place. You know what? Before this conversation,
drop the link below.
Before this conversation, I went and grabbed some of your art from your website, and so that I can show people some of the stuff that you work on, and then give them the link. This is one of Jeremy's board games, Inner Compass. So you'll see his style here, one of his styles. I think this is one of Jeremy's most iconic pieces. New York City will never die. Throwing a bagel at death. Here's a few more that are color. This one says completely riveted Asians. I checked the date on it. It was August 2019, which was when Crazy Rich Asians came out. So connect the dots. And then for me, having worked in a few marketing and ad agencies, and startups also, the flat design people, I can resonate with that. And this one is just so funny because the dude is regular and he's looking at all these flat people. 3 dates were fun, but if you want to see more, subscribe to my OnlyFans. Speaking of everywhere, like what I gravitate toward with Jeremy's work is like it's witty, it's like multi-layered humor. It's not like a one-liner or anything, you know. This is one of my favorite top pieces. Next time, use cold water. They're like most of them are very like specific to you know, something current happening, but this one's just in general like stupid funny, which is totally my style. So Jeremy is giving a talk on May 20th with the company Creatively. That's like an employment website for creatives. The talk is called What the Fuck Do I Do? You can find Jeremy and find info about the event on his website, jeremywinslife.com. That's JeremyWins life, life.com. Jeremy, like, you know how we were talking about Asian American comic book idols earlier?
Right?
When I was a teenager or like in elementary school, I discovered Jim Lee's art, comic book art, and I was like riveted, right? It was so dynamic, super creative, and just, it was perfect. And I didn't know he was Asian until like several months later when I was flipping through the Wizard magazine. And I was like, whoa, this dude's Asian. Like, because I was a drawer too. Like I had a talent for drawing as a kid. And I was like, this dude is Asian. I can do this for a job too. Like I can be a professional artist. And so it meant so much to me to discover this, like that one of my art idols was like an Asian American, and that it's not exclusively like for white guys, right?
Yeah,
so that was
Jim
super
Lee
cool.
is amazing. Yeah. It's
The
funny,
others,
yeah. So we see so many Lee last names, and we're like, Stan Lee, is
Stan
he
Lee,
Asian?
exactly.
And then you see Jim Lee, and you're like, is that Stan Lee's son? Of course he's not going to be
Exactly.
Asian then. Yeah.
Okay,
Jim
so
Lee's
the reason I tell
fantastic.
that
He's an amazing
story,
artist.
the reason I tell that story is I discovered your work maybe like 2 years ago, a year and a half to 2 years ago. And at first I didn't pay attention to the signature. And then one day I was like, whoa, this dude says Nguyen. This dude is Vietnamese. What? And it meant so much to me to like be able to relate to an artist whose work I really, really liked, and then be like, whoa, they're also Vietnamese. That's so cool. So
Thank
that
you.
was
I'm so
why
glad
your
you
stuff
said that
resonated.
because thank you. Yeah. No. So I do want to talk about my signature, actually. You know, I deliberately chose to show my last name. Some of my colleagues, they do first names. A lot of the other artists do a first initial and a last name. And I went the direction of the first initial with last name because I really wanted to put Nguyen into the pages of the New Yorker. I
So
also
awesome.
really, thanks. Yeah. And I really also like to connect my name to the artwork itself. A lot of cartoons will feature the curl at the end of the N leading into a line in the drawing. And I do that just because I want to maybe subtly tell readers that the artwork is an extension of myself, and
Wow.
I'm not just like a separate entity from the artwork. So yeah, I'm very happy that Nguyen caught your eye
I picked
as
it up.
as
I
an
was
Asian
so
last name.
stoked. Yeah, and
Thank you. That's
specifically a
awesome.
Vietnamese last name too. I feel like, you know, Southeast Asian representation recently has gotten a little more prominent, but I still crave that, you know, and so it meant a lot to me. There's an awesome video on the New Yorker website called How to Draw a City, in which you break down the construction of your drawings technically and like tell people where you lay stuff out. But you also mentioned that you write first and draw after, and you write a lot and think a lot about these concepts. Long setup, but my question for you is like, what's the process or the challenge of distilling all of these thoughts and concepts into just a single panel of comic?
Yeah, so being a writer first and an artist second, I think is kind of common with New Yorker cartoons. But I also might have misspoke when I said that because these days I feel like an artist first, writer second. It changes. There's always this. It's always like, am I a writer or am I an artist? It switches back and forth all the time. And right now I feel like an illustrator first and my writing is sucking. But yes, for the cartoons, I definitely write first a majority of the time, just because it's like, you know, I don't want to jump into drawing something if the foundations of a good joke isn't there. So I have to sit down and really work hard at writing. But I know a lot of my colleagues who are literally professional writers who also draw. They come up with jokes like that, it feels like, at least. and they're so quick to it. And then they're like, hey, Jeremy, how do you draw this in perspective? How do you draw this guy's arm? And I'm sitting there like, how did you come up with that amazing joke? I'm jealous. So there is a funny dynamic between the writer side and the artist side, and then cartoonists who are writer first, artist first. So the process changes all the time, but generally I try and find a good joke before I do the art.
That's probably not a very easy job.
Yeah, you have to be very clear and make sure that every piece of information is getting communicated quickly and easily by anyone. Going back to talking about style, that was kind of a deliberate choice to come up with this very clean, simple, very easily digestible, not too much details surrounding the art. I used to do stand-up, and that's kind of what stand-up is. You don't want to have too much fluff in order to get to the punchline. Yeah. It becomes they call it a shaggy dog, and you don't want too much of a shaggy dog in your joke.
That's my quarantine hair, shaggy BAO. So before the pandemic shut stuff down, you worked on this, you organized a show of all the Asian American artists that contribute to the New Yorker comics called Asian Babies. What made you feel like that was the moment where you wanted to celebrate the Asian New Yorker artists?
So there were some fantastic shows that I've seen leading up to that point. There was a funny ladies cartoon show at the Society of Illustrators, and fantastic show. A ton of the New Yorker cartoonist women came out to attend the show, to speak on panels, and I loved it. It was a sold out show. There were people who couldn't get into the panel discussions. And I visited a friend of mine who had a gallery show at Pearl River Mart. Her name is Ding Ding Hu. And she's a fantastic illustrator, but she had an amazing debut show at Pearl River Mart where I got to meet the store owner, Joanne Kwong. She pitched this idea of doing a show in this loft space that they have specifically for Asian artists. And this was around 2018, and I didn't feel like I could do a solo show at that point in my life. So I teamed up with my colleague Amy Huang to curate a show of all the Asian New Yorker cartoonists who had been published up until that point. And it's kind of crazy, the New Yorker magazine has been around since about 1925. They're coming up on their 100-year anniversary or so. And in their almost 100 years, they've only had 10 Asian cartoonists.
Wow.
And that we know of.
Wow.
And Amy, my colleague, is maybe the second who has been published. Yeah, I might be the fourth or fifth. And, there were 10 other Asian cartoonists that we asked to contribute cartoons for this show. And there was also an Asian American cartoonist who had one cartoon published in the 1960s. We reached out to his family, and they were very happy to send his cartoons to us.
That's so cool.
And, it's amazing. It's amazing. He had a baby photo of him sent that was taken in 1920 as well. Wow. We got a print of it, not the actual photo, but we had a reproduction of the photo. So that was a 100-year-old photo that was amazing to have in our gallery. Yeah, it was great. It was great to correspond with all of my colleagues and give them a platform to have their work shown in a gallery space like that. I think we've doubled in Asian cartoonists at the New Yorker in that year. So there might be now like 18 or 20 cartoonists of various Asian ethnicities represented in 2021. I think it was very important to get our voice heard. A lot of our colleagues showed up to the show and didn't realize there were only 10 artists of Asian descent in the entire history. And I think it made them see things a lot differently and recognize that we have an important voice and that some of their favorite artists are Asian cartoonists. And we got to do it in Chinatown, basically. It was fantastic. So we were very happy to bring that show to the New York Asian community.
Yay, bravo. That's so cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me remind folks watching, I'm talking with Jeremy Nguyen. He's an illustrator and cartoonist who's very witty, accessible, funny artwork you can see in the New Yorker, but also he's got a bunch of like books and merch, and he's starting to share his knowledge with the world. On May 20, he has a talk called "What the Fuck Do I Do to Help Artists Understand the Industry?" You can find Jeremy, get more info on that event, and check out like the cool merch that he has on his website, jeremywinslife.com. As of today, what do you think like the most out there weird venue would be that you can imagine your art being in?
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting ideas I've had in the past. When I was doing stand-up, I considered doing like a one-man show that had this high visual production to it. Mm-hmm. You know, it was never something I actually worked on, but having a stage production where the artwork comes to life as like a pop-up book would be super interesting.
Wow.
I've always loved the idea of art integrated into public spaces. So I don't know. I don't know if that's even that out there, to be honest. So there's so many cool ideas that are out there. But part of me is like, I just want to design a lamp with my art on it. That would be cool. Like, that's crazy enough for me to be like, this is nuts. This is absolutely the most bonkers thing I've done. They printed my art on a lamp. Like that would be a dream come true. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's that normcore trend that's happening. It's like as normal as possible. Oh, you know what? There's that cartoon you brought up with the New York City will never die.
Yeah.
I bought a bagel slicer that I would like to print that cartoon on. So if that's weird, you know, if somebody wants to have a bagel slicer in their house with my art on it, just hanging on the wall, that would be really cool.
I love it. That's so funny. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you're especially excited about?
Yeah,
that you can talk about.
Super exciting to work on. That the lecture, What the Fuck Do I Do, is one of the things that is, you know, it's in 2 weeks, so it's taking over my brain. And I'm going to be providing some original illustrations for that and maybe some animated GIFs in that presentation. I've also been working on I don't even know if it's announced yet, but my friend Josh posted about it. We've made an expansion for Santa Monica. So yeah, we're going to be doing some cool weekend events that take place in Santa Monica. So you'll see cards like a farmer's market or the Santa Monica, we call it the Santa Monica Marathonica. I just love putting all these dumb, awful pun jokes and alliteration jokes, every kind of wordplay jokes as I can into this game. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. And yeah, there's plenty of projects that are coming out, but I can't talk about those.
Yeah, those are exciting. So I'm not sure what growth looks like in your industry or even in your craft, but like, is it just about evolving to reflect your truest self, which is a very liberating idea? Or do you have like more concrete ideas about like how you will grow as an artist or as a cartoonist, professional cartoonist?
The way you put it is perfect and eloquent. Being able to be your true self is absolutely the end goal.
Wow.
But I would also say that challenging yourself will help you find that true self. I don't know. It's such a vague philosophy of how do you become your true self. But I really enjoy the idea of growing as an artist as, how can you be of service? How can you do more than what is in your immediate surroundings and world? It's not just about personal development. I think artistic growth is also helping others around you find their artistic growth as well. So as much as I love making art and making art for the various places that are willing to publish it, there is still a lot of work to do to provide art to, the next generation of artists.
That's so cool. I've been also mentoring some Asian American musicians who are younger than me, and it's the most rewarding thing. So I totally know where you're coming from. Yeah.
I'm not going to have kids, so better drop off all this knowledge onto...
Same. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I wish I knew you better so I can ask this question a little better, but like outside of art and work, like what's Jeremy working on for Jeremy?
That's funny that you say it that way. Because we're so inclined to think that work is all we should do.
Yeah.
So, I'm enjoying I'm enjoying things. I'm enjoying cultivating and propagating plants.
Nice.
My girlfriend just got a dog, so I'm enjoying raising this new puppy of hers and being a part of her life in as much way as possible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just working on myself and making sure that my bedroom and my studio is clean at the end of the day. That all my dishes are washed and put into the washing machine exactly right, so that they can get washed properly. I'm just trying to learn how to be a grown-up and be a human and not always be thinking of cartoons and jokes and annoying people with my puns or smart aleck comments everywhere I go. I'm trying to, maybe that's not my true self, but I am trying to integrate myself with society in a better way than I currently am.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So as part of your job, you have to turn around like massive quantities of work, even if most of it doesn't get published.
Sure.
Do you have a hot tip that you can share with me about how to maintain that flow of creativity and, being consistent about being productive?
Yeah. I operate on a different level than some other artists might. I kind of love doing the commercial client work. It's fun to me to be able to take a brief and deliver work that expands on what the brief wants and also satisfies my own personal goals that I have with making art. So I like to balance that out with my personal work, and I'm very lucky that my personal work is basically my New Yorker cartoons and the cartoons that I post on Instagram. I really like to oscillate between having the client work, and then when I get tired or sick of it or bored of it, then I can go back and do New Yorker cartoons. I wouldn't say that I turn off my brain for it, but I can switch. I can switch to a different mindset when I'm working for somebody else and not having to have this anxiety of, am I funny enough in the New Yorker cartoons? Yeah, so that's like always, you know, the nagging thing that happens in a cartoonist's brain is this cartoon funny? You know, have I just been looking at it for too long? Can I get another set of eyes on this? And when you're sick of the rejection that comes with not being funny, then you can just focus on the art and make some pretty stuff for the clients who are working with you.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Everybody says invest. When you invest, you diversify, right? In business.
Exactly.
And investment.
Yeah, I'm still Asian. I still want the approval of my elders. And so the client work is, you know, my math brain problem solving to make sure that people are satisfied on the other end of the finished artwork. Yeah. So.
Awesome. Jeremy, thank you for spending time with me. This has been such a good, fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk.
Really great.
And to talk with you is fantastic as well.
That's awesome. So I'm going to give a little outro, and then I'll come back and say a proper goodbye to you. So don't hang up. Don't go anywhere.
Sounds good.
I'll come back in a minute. Guys, I've been chatting with Jeremy Nguyen. He is a cartoonist, illustrator, generally funny artist, man. He has a talk coming on the 20th of May. And you can find Jeremy, all that info at his website, jeremywinslife.com. If you also are able to financially support me in making this very resource-intensive show, I'd appreciate it if you could buy me a coffee. You can do that at coffeewithbao.com. And that's it. Thank you so much for having Coffee with Bao. We'll see you next time.